Got dreams of being a professional podcaster, but have no idea what you're doing?
This is impossible.
That's about to change.
A new kind of school.
Welcome to the Pod School Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. This week I'm going to be talking about whether or not you should swear on your podcast. This idea came about from a conversation that I had with a friend of mine. The two of us are developing a podcast together at the moment. And in a couple of the trial episodes that we've done, I've done an edit of the show and then sent it over to him to listen to, and he's sort of come back and said, why have you beeped all the swear words out? Swearing on your podcast, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it at all, but as ridiculous as it sounds, it still has to be a creative decision because there are consequences to dropping the F-bomb every 5 seconds in your content. So I just wanted to go through a few things that you should think about when you're deciding whether or not to get a little fruity with your language in your show. The most important thing to think about is who is your audience? Who do you want to appeal to, and what do you want people to think about your show? The thing about swearing is that I find it doesn't necessarily add anything. I'm happy if I'm having a conversation with a co-host and they swear or I swear, for that to happen in the natural flow of conversation. There's nothing wrong with that. But in the edit, I will always beep those things out. And the reason that I do that is because it's not like you don't know what's going on under there. It's not like you're beeping out 15 minutes of content and you're sitting there as a listener thinking, what are they saying? I feel so left out. But for some people, that kind of stuff is offensive. You might find that a little bit prudish, but there are plenty of people that will turn away from your content if they hear language that they don't like. And I think you should always be aiming to appeal to as many people as possible and not give anybody a reason, if you can help it, to turn off your show. Of course, that doesn't apply if you want your show to be rough and rude and edgy and all of those things. If that is what you are going for, if that is your creative decision, if you want a show like that, and there are certainly people out there who are happy to listen to that, then you have to be happy with appealing to just those people and then label your episode explicit so that those people know exactly what they're going to get, and you don't have any mums in the car with the kids who think it's clean because you haven't labeled it as explicit, and then they're sitting in the car and they've got their kid asking, Mum, what's a That would not be helpful. The other thing that is important to think about is, will this come back to bite you in the ass? The thing about podcasting is it is kind of the audio equivalent of Google. Once you've said that stuff and it's out there on iTunes, until you remove the show, if you're going to just let it sit there, then all of that stuff is just searchable and ready to go. Now, of course, we all swear and there's no issues with that. But while you might not mind dropping the F-bomb left, right and centre now, if in 6 months when you're going to get a job and an employer listens back to the podcast that you've done and hears that you're dropping the F-bomb all the time, is it going to come back to bite you? Is it going to be something that you're going to regret? Again, there's no reason why you can't swear on your podcast. But my thought is that by bleeping it out, the content still exists there in some way. The fiery nature of what you're saying, your audience still get a sense that you were fired up by this and you were passionate about it. But the ones that are potentially offended by things won't turn around. And again, if you have an employer or somebody search that stuff later in life, you don't want to get to the point where you're thinking, oh God, I got to go back through all 86 episodes and just get rid of the water disaster. Make it easier for yourself from the get-go and just edit those things out. As long as your beeps are not loud and blowing people's ears off, and that you make sure that they're at the same level as the content so that they're not jarring when people are listening to your show, then there shouldn't be any reason why people should have a problem. I've had some people that have emailed on my show, Paul and Rach. We had a bit of a rougher show and we would swear from time to time when we were recording the episodes, and I would always beep that out. And occasionally I would have people email us and say, why do you leave the swears out? And I would just write back, because you know what we're saying. We're not leaving you out. We're just making sure that this content is available for everybody and that nobody has a reason to turn around and say, I don't want to listen to it. If you are going to swear or talk about anything that's a bit more hardcore, it's really important to label your podcast appropriately and to put explicit on there. Let us be very clear. It is fantastic to surprise your audience, but not in a way that makes them turn around and run out of the door screaming, never to walk back through it again. So if you are going to go down that path, just make sure that you're very clear in the labeling in the back of your podcast host. Choose explicit, unless, of course, your show isn't necessarily explicit, but there are a few F-bombs in there. In that case, just put a warning at the front of your episode. You can label that clean, but just make sure that when you are greeting your audience, you let those who are offended by swear words know that they are entering at their own risk. I hope that's helped you work out whether or not dropping colourful language throughout your episode is the right thing for you. If you want a little bit more step-by-step help, you can always head to podschool.com.au to find out more about my online podcasting course. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next week. And until then, happy podcasting.
That's all for today.